You know how in movies, the big family dinner scene is where everyone smiles, passes the mashed potatoes, and pretends they love each other? Yeah, this wasn't that. By the time the bread rolls hit the table, I already had the DNA test results in my jacket pocket, the waiter was on my payroll. Okay, maybe just promised a fat tip. And the Spotify playlist was cued to hit Another One Bites the Dust right after dessert. If you're wondering why a normal, 70 hours a week working, mortgage-paying, dog-walking American husband would stage an ambush in front of the entire family, well, let's rewind. Not too far, though. God forbid I bore you with how we met Fluff. My wife, let's call her Emily because betrayal incarnate is too on the nose, used to say she loved how hard I worked. "You're so dedicated, babe," she'd say while I was gulping down coffee at 5 a.m. to go pull another double shift. Turns out, she loved my work ethic because it left her plenty of free time to network with my brother. And not just emotionally. Yeah, you get the picture. The pregnancy test I found in our bathroom wasn't the kind you cheer about with confetti. It was the kind where you feel your ears ringing, your stomach doing Olympic-level flips, and your brain trying to negotiate with reality. My first thought wasn't even, oh my God, I'm going to be a dad. It was, wait a second. I haven't even been in the same zip code long enough to make that happen. And that's when the conspiracy gears started turning. I mean, you work 70 hours a week, you think you know your schedule. But apparently my schedule was just a Google Calendar invite for betrayal. And my mom, God bless the woman, wasn't just a bystander. No, she was like the mission control of the whole operation. "Emily's been so tired lately," she'd tell me, with that tone mothers use when they're hiding something the size of a small nuclear warhead. She'd come over during the day to help around the house, which I now realize was code for covering tracks like a professional cleaner after a mob hit. But let's be clear. This isn't just a story about cheating. This is about family. The kind of family that smiles in your face while rearranging the knife collection in your back. It's about toxic love, where everyone says they have your best interest at heart, but somehow you end up being the only one without a chair when the music stops. My brother, let's call him Chad because of course his name would be Chad, was always the charming one. You know, the guy who could get out of a speeding ticket by complimenting the cop's sunglasses. Growing up, he'd accidentally borrow my stuff and never give it back. First it was my skateboard, then my favorite jacket, and apparently he decided to go for the full collector's set, my wife. But see, I wasn't going to just confront them in private. Oh no, this was going to be public, theatrical, and perfectly timed for maximum psychological damage. A good revenge isn't just about shouting gotcha, it's about crafting the moment so perfectly that the betrayal hits them in waves. You want them thinking about it in the shower years later, wondering where it all went wrong. And I wanted my mom there, front row, because let's face it, if you're going to help cover up your son knocking up his brother's wife, you deserve the popcorn seat when it all blows up. But before we get to the dinner, you need to understand one thing. I didn't just stumble onto the truth. I was guided by a series of ridiculous sitcom-level clues that would have been too obvious in a Netflix drama. Like the time I came home early and found my brother's truck parked in our driveway. Or the time Emily suddenly became obsessed with family time with my mom. Or the time I found Chad's hoodie in our laundry basket and she said she must have accidentally washed it. Sure, because I'm sure he just wanders the neighborhood shirtless, right? At first I told myself it was all a misunderstanding. I mean, who wants to believe their marriage is a dumpster fire with a baby-shaped plot twist? But the human brain is cruel. It keeps collecting receipts, even when your heart is screaming return to sender. So yeah, by the time that dinner came around, I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a man on a mission. A man who'd been double-crossed by his own blood, who'd been lied to by the woman he thought would grow old with him, and who'd been played like a fiddle by the very person who raised him. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's this. I don't do quiet revenge. I do the kind of revenge that becomes a Thanksgiving story for generations. Which brings us back to the restaurant, the playlist, and the DNA results burning a hole in my pocket. But I'll save that for later. Because trust me, when the fork drops, the jaws drop harder. By the time I decided to throw the dinner, I'd already storyboarded the prequel in my head like a true crime doc narrated by a guy with a mustache and a coffee addiction. Because if you want revenge to land, you have to understand the origin story of the betrayal, the toxic love, the cheating, the family politics, and the cosmic stupidity that tied it all together. Rewind to the moment I found the pregnancy test, the one with two pink lines that looked like equal signs for a math problem I did not sign up to solve. I stood there in our bathroom, fluorescent light humming like a broken halo, and did the timeline. "Do the math, son," I heard my dad's voice say, from wherever fathers go when they're done giving advice. Because me, 70-hour weeks, missing holidays, kissing my wife's forehead in the dark like a polite ghost, yeah, those numbers didn't add. Timeline math birthed. Theory 1. Immaculate conception via Amazon Prime. Timeline math birthed Theory 2. My brother Chad contributing to the household in a way that was not listed on the lease. Theory 2 came with corollaries. My mom as logistics coordinator, plausible deniability certified, operations codename nothing to see here. And because I'm a modern American man with anxiety and an iPhone, I started collecting data points like a suburban sea. Find my iPhone pings that overlapped like two 8th graders slow dancing. DoorDash receipts for tiramisu on Tuesday nights, our old date dessert, delivered to my own address at hours when I was at work, and Chad's truck GPS. Yes, he never turned off location sharing because he thinks passwords are government propaganda, was parked nearby. A stray hoodie, sure, but then a second hoodie because betrayal always forgets its laundry. Prenatal vitamins charged to our joint card on a day when Emily texted me, headed to yoga. And I believed her because I worshipped at the temple of benefit of the doubt, like a man determined to be holy enough to deserve love he was already paying for in installments. If you think this is me spiraling, you're right. I spiraled so hard I achieved orbit. I hired a private investigator who, I swear to God, introduced himself as Randy with the raccoon eyes. And I was too tired to ask if that was a brand or a medical condition. Randy set up outside our house with a camera and a thermos like he was birdwatching infidelity, and he sent me photos stamped with dates and times in a font that said, "Your dreams are collapsing in Helvetica." In one picture, my mom is walking up the steps with a casserole dish, because of course betrayal is comfort food adjacent. In another, Chad is leaving out the side door looking like a man who just remembered he left the oven on, which, in a way, he had. If this sounds like a conspiracy, let me assure you it was one, and my mother was the HOA president of it. She'd call me with updates about Emily's mood swings, voice dipped in honey, and slip in little landmines like, "If you were home more, she wouldn't feel so alone," as if loneliness was a Ouija board that spelled out, "Invite your brother over." I used to think my mom favored Chad because he was fragile, a ceramic son who needed protecting. Turns out he was Teflon, and I was the pan that kept getting scraped. The first time I actually confronted Emily, I didn't confront her at all. I asked about a doctor's appointment, and she said something about women's health in that tone that makes a man backpedal like he just almost walked into a ladies' room. I respected boundaries so hard, I built a fence around my own sanity. But then there was the Ring doorbell footage, which became my nature documentary. Behold the mating habits of suburban mammals in their native driveway. There's Emily, hair tucked into a hoodie, hopping into Chad's truck at 10:37 p.m. on a Wednesday after texting me going to Walgreens. Maybe Walgreens opened a backseat clinic. Who knows? I'm not a scientist. My therapist, Kevin, a ficus I talked to when the real therapist's waitlist was 8 weeks, told me to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, I told Kevin, and he agreed by shedding a single leaf like a supportive dad in a coming-of-age film. I told myself to be gracious, to be measured, to be the kind of man who rises above. And then I realized rising above is what cheaters expect you to do so they can keep crawling underneath. That's when the revenge storyboard wrote itself. Not anger, orchestration, not rage, timing. I'd explode once, not in 1,000 petty arguments, and the shockwave would be efficient, a single controlled demolition on the skyline of our so-called family. But before you think I'm all cold calculation, let me admit the fantasy pieces, because my brain started inserting myth where the facts were too ugly. I imagined the baby like a changeling swapped by fairies, except the fairies were wearing cargo shorts and smelled like barbecue. I imagined my mom as a kitchen witch stirring a slow cooker that brewed silence and plausible deniability. I imagined our house sitting on a ley line that connects every American tragedy where we work ourselves to death while calling it love. I imagined an oracle living in the Costco rotisserie section whispering, "He who brings home the chicken is not always the father of the feast." And when Randy, the raccoon, delivered the packet, the photos, the text logs, the grainy video that would not hold up in court, but definitely would in a family dining booth, I went to a clinic and did the thing I swore I'd never do because love is supposed to be trust without paperwork. I took a paternity test on a pregnancy that wasn't even full term. Did you know science can sometimes tell you the father before the baby even shows up to its own story? America can land rovers on Mars and also tell you your brother is out here ruining holidays in the second trimester. The numbers came back with that smug clinical confidence of a thermostat set by someone else. Probability this child is mine, effectively 0. Probability it belongs to a man with my last name and my mother's favorite dimples. Well, let's just say it didn't require a chalkboard. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot with the printout in my hands and laughed, not because it was funny, but because despair needs a release valve and mine is inappropriate humor. A woman walking her golden retriever gave me a look like, "Sir, are you okay?" And I wanted to tell her, I'm the opposite of okay, but I do have a plan. That night, I set the dinner reservations and texted the group chat that has seen many a passive-aggressive birthday plan, and I typed, Sunday, 6:30, family dinner, big news. My mom heart-reacted like she was RSVPing to the coronation. Chad sent a thumbs up because his thumbs have never done a hard day's work. Emily asked, "Are we celebrating something?" And I wrote, yes, which was true in the same way a tornado is technically weather. And then I staged the scene, the playlist cued with irony, the waiter briefed with a safe word. If I said special, he would bring the envelope like it was creme brulee. The corner booth chosen so there'd be no escape routes except the truth. I cleaned my jacket because revenge deserves good tailoring. I rehearsed the speech because pain deserves clean sentences. I kissed the dog on the head and told him none of this was his fault. And I stood in the mirror practicing a calm face because if there's anything I learned in this fraudulent season of family, it's that the person who stays calm gets to write the ending. And if a tiny, uninvited voice in my head whispered that I could still forgive, still salvage, still build a bridge over toxic love to something like mercy, I turned the volume down and told it we were under new management. The dinner was set. The fuse was lit. All that was left was to smile, sit down, and let the truth walk in like dessert. By the time Sunday rolled around, I'd rehearsed this thing so many times in my head, it felt less like a family dinner and more like opening night on Broadway. If Broadway was sponsored by revenge, betrayal, toxic love, cheating, and every awkward holiday gathering you've ever survived in your American family. I didn't just want to reveal the truth. I wanted to set the stage so perfectly that the reveal would stick in their heads like a bad jingle. They couldn't stop humming for the rest of their lives. I got to the restaurant early. An hour early. I tipped the hostess up front to put us in the back corner booth, the kind that traps people so they can't accidentally leave when things get spicy. I told the waiter the safe word again, special, and slid him a 50 with the kind of eye contact that says, this isn't about food, my man. This is about destiny. Then I opened the envelope with the DNA results just to feel the crisp paper between my fingers, the way an action hero might check his weapon before the big showdown. The first to arrive was my mom, in full Sunday best, pearls shining like they'd been polished with moral superiority. She kissed my cheek and gave me that, you've lost weight, but not in a good way look only mothers can pull off. What's the big news? She asked, her tone dripping with curiosity and the faintest sprinkle of suspicion. I smiled and told her, you'll see, which made her grin like she'd just been cast as the lead in her own soap opera. Next came Chad, all casual swagger and cologne that smelled like discount betrayal. He slid into the booth with a, what's up, bro? Like we were still 10 years old and fighting over who got the front seat. Then Emily arrived, looking nervous and that I hope my lies still hold way, wearing the necklace I bought her for our anniversary. You know, the one she wore on date nights? With me. I resisted the urge to picture who else had seen it sparkle. We ordered drinks, small talk happened. Mom talked about her church bake sale. Chad bragged about some business opportunity that sounded suspiciously like a pyramid scheme wearing a cheap suit. Emily kept glancing at me like she was trying to read if tonight was celebration or execution. The food arrived. Steaks, pasta, salads. I let everyone settle in. I asked about work, about the weather, about the neighbor's new boat, letting the tension stretch like a rubber band pulled so tight you almost hear it hum. And then, halfway through dinner, I dropped my fork, leaned back and said, so, you've probably been wondering why I brought everyone together tonight. They all looked at me. Mom with polite interest, Chad with mild boredom, Emily with the face of someone who just remembered where she hid the body. I started with the love story. How Emily and I met, how I thought she was the one, how I worked 70-hour weeks to give her the life she deserved. I laid it on thick, not out of nostalgia, but because the higher you build the tower, the better the fall. Then I pivoted. But, I said, drawing out the word like a slow knife, sometimes love stories take unexpected turns. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and set it on the table. Chad's eyes narrowed. Mom's lips pressed together. Emily's hand twitched toward her water glass. "This," I said, tapping the envelope, "is a paternity test for the baby you're carrying, Emily." I let the words hang there like a bad smell no one wanted to acknowledge. Emily froze. Mom blinked twice. Chad looked like he'd just been told the ending of a movie he hadn't seen yet. I slid the paper out slowly, like a magician revealing the final card. According to science, cold, unbiased, merciless science, there's a 0% chance that I'm the father. I turned my gaze to Chad, but there's a very high probability that the man responsible is sitting right here. Emily's lip trembled. Mom's hand went to her pearls, which I half expected to shatter like in the movies. Chad opened his mouth, then closed it, then looked at Mom like she was the teacher, and he was waiting for permission to speak. I didn't stop. And just in case anyone here is wondering how I know this, I've got photos, texts, and enough video footage to qualify for a true crime special. I gestured to the waiter, said special, and he brought over a manila folder like it was the dessert menu from hell. I laid the photos out on the table, grainy black and white shots of Chad's truck in my driveway at night, Emily slipping inside, Mom arriving in the morning. I always knew family was supposed to have your back, I said, but I didn't realize that meant putting a knife in it first. The silence was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. The table next to us stopped eating. Even the kitchen noise dimmed. Emily whispered, "I'm sorry," but it was so faint it might have been to herself. Mom tried to speak, but I cut her off. "Save it, Mom. I already know you helped cover it up. You're not a bystander. You're an accomplice." I picked up my glass, raised it in a mock toast. "To family. May we all eventually find one that actually deserves the name." Then I stood, dropped a wad of cash on the table, and walked out before anyone could reply, leaving them in a little corner booth prison of shame and overcooked pasta. You'd think walking out of that restaurant would feel like one of those cinematic moments, slow motion, the hero leaving the explosion behind without looking back. But in real life, the explosion is emotional, the fireball is invisible, and the only slow motion is you realizing your phone's still on the table next to the evidence folder. I doubled back, grabbed it without making eye contact, and left again, this time for good. The air outside was warm, sticky, that late summer American humidity that makes your shirt cling to your back. I stood there for a second, letting the night noise of clinking glasses and muffled laughter from other tables wash over me, thinking, somewhere in there, people are having normal family dinners. Not mine. Mine had just turned into the series finale.